Well, hello internets, here we are. Have ourselves a bit of a video. Noticed a few things in the news lately that I'd like to comment on. Feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions below if you choose. And yeah, welcome to our vlog. So, here we go. Well, recently here, the other night, there was a call out to action about 2 or 3 fire trucks and emergency crews and stuff were called to a house fire. Before you guys get too excited, no, there's no video footage. I didn't jump in my truck and go down there and film it. It probably would have been quite the fire because it was an older house, and it was filled full of a bunch of stuff that was well flammable, and it more than would have burned. This house had been a problem house for 30 years. I remember when I was a kid, maybe 10, maybe 12 years old, this house was a problem house then. My dad knew the young family that lived there, and they lived in that house without a front door. My dad got together some money and bought a front door for that house to put on that house, so they could secure the house, heat the house. And I don't know what's happened over the last 30 years, but can't really have been much change from that. The area around it has virtually stayed the same or gotten worse. Some of the other problem houses around it have burnt down or been demolished and rebuilt to newer homes. And from what people are saying on the social medias, it was a problem house for the last few years for sure. Constant calls for the cops to go there, and stolen things found there, stolen vehicles, bicycles, people found there unconscious, a lot of illegal stuff going on there, but nothing ever seems to happen. And finally this house burns down, whether it was arson or whether it was a space heater catches on fire. If the place has no gas, has no power, and has no water, it's basically condemned. If a house has no utilities, then it's technically not livable. However, there are some landlords that'll continue to rent a house even if it's not in a livable condition. Some of these houses, they might have been grandma's house and grandma's in the home. Grandma has no idea the condition of her property, and she thinks that her grandkids or her children are taking care of it when really they're not. Some of these houses, I don't know how the city lets them go as long as they have. You would think after a problem like this, where there's no power, no water, they're unfit for human habitation, you would think there would be a process in the courts where those houses go through. They are seized, condemned, seized, and bulldozed immediately. Because what happens is, if they're not boarded up, or at least if they're not bulldozed or at least boarded up, people go back in them. People start to squat in them, live in them, without any utilities. I can think of 3 or 4 instances in the last few years where the cops have had to go back to a house that they've already raided and boarded up to remove people that have moved back into that house to set up shop to do whatever they were doing in it originally. Some of these houses, when the time comes, they don't just go quietly. They cause much more problems than they're worth. And when a house does burn down, there is quite often heat damage and smoke damage to the surrounding buildings around it. Whether it's siding or whether it's an actual takes out the neighboring house next to it. Sometimes the natural gas is on, and sometimes the house itself pops, which then takes out the neighboring house, you know. So it's quite a huge problem. And how do they handle problem houses or condemned houses where you are? Do they just ignore them and keep raiding these houses because they're a source of funding, source of income for law enforcement? Or do they go in there, find the owner, knock it down, condemn it, kind of a thing, seize it, sell the lot at some kind of auction for somebody to build a brand new house in its place? Leave your comments below. Recently there has been, I think, 4 of these houses in the last 6 months that have been condemned. They go in there, arrest a bunch of people, board up the house, condemn the house, put up a bunch of big steel fences, and then the house sits empty for a couple of years or so before something's ever done about it. If the houses are too far gone, then they're knocked down. If the houses are still salvageable, then I'm assuming the owner has a chance to either sell it or fix it and then sell it. There have been cases where people have bought problem houses that were quite bad at one time, gone inside, pressure washed and fumigated, and hauled out buckets full of things that have been left in crevices and ductwork, and pretty much go in there and totally rebuild these houses and then sell them in the future to an unsuspecting family that has no idea the history of a home. There was one home that I can think of that caught on fire, and it wasn't a huge fire, but it was enough that it wrecked the house. It wasn't livable. Well, it was sold at auction, it was rebuilt, and it was sold to somebody who had no idea that there was a fire in it. It was never disclosed. Now, if the fire damage is done, repair is done correctly, you won't even be able to tell. You know, whether it's sealing the smoke damage, removing anything burnt or charred. But really, some of these things should be disclosed of the house's past to for the next owner, just under common decency. Even the apartment that I live in here, with the fire that happened across the hall, and the two suites that were burnt out, and the one suite with water damage, I would imagine, you know, all that would have to be disclosed if this complex ever did resell. I don't imagine they ever told the new tenants that moved in there what happened in there. I don't imagine they disclosed that these apartments had burned down and they just were freshly rebuilt, hence why everything is all brand new, sparkly and shiny, and no one's ever lived in it yet but you guys. But if I moved into a place, I would like to know the history of it. You know, sometimes the previous tenants of an apartment or a house, when they move, they obviously don't tell all of their people where they moved to. So one day you come home and you find somebody passed out in your backyard because this is where he used to live at one time. You come home and he's living in your garage, or you come home and he's broke into your house because he thinks he still lives here, because before he got sent to jail, that's where he lived, and no one ever told him that his buddy moved. So something like that should it be potentially disclosed? You know, what are your thoughts on all that? Once again, leave your comments below. I remember when I was a kid, there were several abandoned or empty or condemned houses in this town. When I was a kid, we used to go play in them. We used to go in there and look at the graffiti. Used to go in there and walk around and see the holes in the walls, and the old tubs and the old toilets and the old radiators and stuff. And I know some of the scrappers had been in there, hence probably why there was holes in the walls. And probably neighborhood kids were in there already putting the holes in the walls too, and probably it was a problem house before then that never did get dealt with, knocked down, boarded up, and just kind of sat dormant and aired out for the next 10 years until the property got developed or whatever. But some of these houses, they can be a fire hazard, they can be a biohazard when they're sitting here unattended or unlived in or unsecured. But it kind of is what it is. Just a few things that I've noticed on the news, a few things that I've seen, a few things that I've had going around in my head that I thought that I'd share with you guys. And as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's Vlogs. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.